Welcome to the Meta Woman podcast. We address the issues, opportunities, and challenges facing women in the development of the metaverse, the biggest revolution since the internet itself. Every week, we bring you conversations with top female talent and business executives operating in the gaming and crypto industries. Here's your host, Lindsay the Boss Poss. The Meta Woman podcast starts now.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Meta Woman podcast, part of the Holodeck Media Podcast Network. I'm your host, Lindsay the Boss Poss, and from struggle to success, we're covering it all. For returning listeners, thank you so much for supporting the show. Can't tell you how much your messages mean to me, especially since I'm just, one lady out here doing her best in the world. And for all of our new listeners, welcome. I hope you enjoy. I have such a wonderful guest this week. This is someone who I just recently got to know, and I've just had so much fun having conversations with this person. It's been so great. I have Becky Taylor, marketing and business development consultant.
Yep.
Becky, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.
For those of you who don't know, I was also late to our recording, and Becky was incredibly patient with me, so I want to thank her for that. If you could just give the audience a couple sentences of background, a little bit about yourself, kind of, the Becky Taylor story. Give me the good stuff.
Yeah. I'll try to make it short because it's never ending.
No, don't try to make it short. We're on a podcast.
No, I mean, the thing is that's always interesting. And I try to tell people is, yes, I've spent the last 10 years, more than 10 years at this point in video games, working on mostly marketing, business development, influencer marketing, kind of the whole gambit. But before I joined the game industry, I was actually working at a nonprofit with at-risk youth, primarily as a case manager. And I got my start in marketing by helping that nonprofit. At that time I was going to college. I was originally going to school for computer science and criminal justice. So pretty much computer forensics. And I ended up shifting and actually getting my bachelor's of science in communications media with a concentration in interactive media, which sounds long, but it's just web development. It's front-end web development and creating apps and things like that. In order to graduate, I had to do an unpaid internship for 6 months full time and pay the school for credits.
Classic.
So I applied to over 200 game studios. And I like telling that story for the sole fact of I, of course, did not get into a single one because that's when I learned that unpaid internships are illegal in a lot of states. Not in Massachusetts back then, apparently. So, I applied everywhere, begging everywhere to give me a chance, creating apps and stuff with games. And this little company reached out to me. I had never heard of them. They needed someone for marketing that knew how to create websites and do front-end web development because they were making a Facebook game. And it was the first 3D game on Facebook. So that sounded really cool. They were using Unity. And I was like, okay, back then, this is back 12, 13 years ago now. I had never heard of Unity back then. I also had never heard of this company, which was Tencent. Because back then, 13 years ago, no one knew. Yeah, no one knew. And yes, pure luck that I end up at a company that is now pretty much the biggest gaming thing because they own majority stake or all of Epic Games at this point. They own Riot Games, tons of different game studios or majority stake in game studios. So that was pretty much my start, was kind of creating this Facebook game with them called Robot Rising. It was a super fun game. And I primarily back then was doing a whole mix of things and learning. And the reason I tell this story is because I have never taken a class in marketing. And I've been doing it very successfully. And learning on my own, researching, things like that. And so, after that, because they end up shutting down the Boston studio. A lot of game studios end up leaving the Boston area. There's still not a lot. There's a bunch of indies out there. And so after that, I went to Amazon as kind of a product manager, marketing manager, creating promotions, left Amazon, ended up getting into consulting at that point. I realized at that point that I like working on a bunch of different things. So I was doing marketing, community management, influencer marketing, business development. I was helping companies such as Reboot with Reboot Developer Conference in Croatia. So I was actually like helping get speakers over there and everything. And I was flying out to Croatia twice a year and working with them. I also helped create a product called GameSite, which a lot of influencers know as it's in-depth Twitch and YouTube analytics and helping them get brand deals with different companies such as Wizards of the Coast, different things like that. So I was one of their prime people doing the marketing, plus also the business development, reaching out to influencers, things like that. After that, I went and worked at Riot Games. I created
company.
Just a little place,
blip on the radar.
Whatever. It's a small startup. Yeah, totally. With like 2,000 employees just in LA alone. But I helped create the partnership program that is still used today with League of Legends and all their other games now that they have multiple games. And then, ended up working at some esports groups such as FaZe Clan, Luminosity Gaming. And most recently, I worked with a geometric 3D like model company called Fizna on their consumer product called Thanks. So yeah, that's pretty much it. I'm still consulting, but now I'm going back and getting my MBA, which we can talk about later on. But yeah, it's been a lot of different things.
That's so funny that you talk about that with marketing, because I actually had a similar career experience where I graduated with a degree in public policy and management, a lot of data analytics stuff. Went to my first job where I was at a think tank producing a lot of economic analysis and wound up being their marketing person, never having had an interest in marketing.
Yeah.
And it's sort of similar in that when you find someone who understands a product and is willing to create material and help explain that product, you wind up in marketing.
Yeah.
Whether you want to or not.
Exactly. I mean, that's the key thing I tell students. I used to do a lot of talks at different colleges, such as Northeastern, WPI. And I always tell them, if you want to get into marketing, you don't necessarily need a degree in marketing. What you need is the ability to understand analytics and turn that analytics into a story and tell a story about your brand and your product. And you need to enjoy talking to people, which obviously I hope if we're on a podcast together, we both like talking to people. And I think that the analytics, the getting in there and talking to people and networking really helps.
Well, and I think when you're passionate about product, an organization, a mission, whatever, or if you just understand it really well, the marketing comes a lot easier too. I have a good sort of, in the gaming industry, I have a good sort of kind of bridge between worlds thing going where I'm not necessarily a hardcore gamer, but I understand the gaming industry, and then I understand, people who aren't gamers and people who are really into pop culture and sports and that kind of stuff really well, because I have a foot in both, and I like to try to use that to give a different perspective.
Well, I mean, it helps creating those like target audiences and like defining, because, you might have a product that has multiple different use cases. And so being able to step into the shoes of different kind of cultures or things like, individuals, that really helps.
Well, and speaking of creating those target audiences, one thing that we've seen a lot of lately is using influencer marketing for that. And I know that we've talked previously about how your work in influencer marketing, the good, the bad, the ugly, what you might like or dislike about it. But as you've been in the marketing side of things for a while, and I think it is actually important to note that you kind of developed into it rather than taking classes and jumping into it with a purpose. Because I do think that gives you just a different perspective than someone who's inherently interested in advertising and jumps in it that way. But what have you seen in how influencer marketing has helped sell a brand or sell a game, or what is it like in the gaming industry? Have you seen it change? What are the things that you like and don't like about it? Love to hear some of your experience on that end of things.
Yeah, no, influencer marketing is one of those things that is so vital to a brand. However, at the same time, it can break your brand. And I think a lot of people, by the time this podcast comes out, it might not be as relevant, but Artisan Builds recently, to kind of just inform people real quick, they were doing, they are known as a PC company that builds computers. They always stream the builds of computers. So influencers, or, they give out these computers. A lot of times they're giveaways, and they're building these computers on stream. So it's kind of like a mix of influencer marketing with their own brand marketing. And recently they were doing a giveaway, and the CEO mid stream on live just started changing the rules of the giveaway because he didn't want to give computers to smaller influencers.
Oh.
Yeah. Which obviously, the thing that people need to understand about influencers is you have different types. You have large influencers like, the PewDiePie of the world, or, any of Lyric, things like that. You have these big ones that, their chat's moving so fast, you can't even see what's happening, but they have so many views and so many people watching them. And then you have smaller ones. Now, the smaller ones I tend to view as ones that may not necessarily drive a ton of conversions. However, they have that dedicated core group that will definitely convert, and they network with a bunch of other influencers. So those small influencers, they tend to work together and, tend to communicate, tend to share. They're the ones who really kind of get the conversation going about products. And so, obviously these influencers spoke up about what was going on. It went viral in obviously a not so good way. And needless to say, as of this week, that company no longer exists.
Yeah, wow, it can happen so fast.
Yeah, it was literally a course of a couple days. Now, obviously, the whole company closing down was not just because of the influencer stuff. It was also because of tax evasion things, supposedly.
I'm glad to hear that, because it would be a little sad if you could go
just
under
destroy it
quickly. Yeah.
But we have seen this many times before where influencer marketing went bad and it really hurt a brand. And we've had companies rebrand, recreate, things like that. Obviously companies like Riot and Ubisoft have had their fair share of dramas and things. So that's something really to keep in mind that is tough when it comes to it. And, the other thing that I struggle with, and then I'll get into all the positives. The other thing I struggle with is, we have gotten to a point where influencer marketing, every single company wants these influencers. So they're in high demand. And they're going after a lot of the big ones. So you look at, say esports vlogger, lifestyle vloggers, things like that, and they're charging thousands. And I've definitely been there where I'm like, hey, I want 15 minutes of your time to talk about a brand, and hey, it's $42,000. And I'm like, I am in the wrong side of this business.
That's a lot of dollars.
Yeah, it kills me. It kills me inside when I'm like, oh, hey, can you make a Facebook post and that cost me $6,000?
That's a lot, yeah.
Yeah. And don't get me wrong, these influencers work very, very hard.
That's what I was going to ask you, just as a quick aside, is what percentage are at that high of a level? Because I would imagine it's kind of a small, we're talking about not necessarily you mentioned PewDiePie. I wouldn't know how much PewDiePie charges, but I imagine it's, we're talking about kind of top 100 to top 1,000, right? When we're talking about these rates, or even
I'd say mid to the mid to top level. So some of those mid level still very expensive.
Gotcha.
It kind of depends on if the person has a manager or not, because there's still definitely plenty of mid-size influencers who are doing this all on their own. If they have a management company, the management company gets a certain percentage, and therefore and they tend to kind of streamline what the prices are. And so, which is good in some ways, because then I can automatically guess, okay, hey, this person at this company, I know that they're going to cost this amount. I can guess hey, okay, it's going to cost, $1,000 per YouTube video, even though they're on the smaller side, bam, done, got it. And it's a really good way to help, gauge what my budget should be. With the smaller influencers, it's good and bad. This is the push and the take is, people who don't have managers might not be pricing themselves correctly, in the sense that, I might have an influencer sometimes where, or this has happened plenty of times where I have an influencer that, I give one influencer, say $1,000 for a video. I find another influencer of the same exact size, and they're like, "Oh yeah, you can give me like $250." And I'm like,
Gotcha.
"No, man, like
And then
no,
charge more. Yeah.
exactly."
More for
And
your work.
I have like side note, like I have definitely like gone to influencers and been like, "Hey man, like you should probably charge like 500, like for your level and like the average and stuff, and like have helped them a little bit." Because I've worked both sides. I've worked where I'm working at a game studio and I obviously want to save money and, make my ROIs better. But then I've also worked on the other side where I'm representing influencers and I'm helping them, get these brand deals. So
Mhm.
I've worked both sides of the table. And so, that experience has really helped me gauge, but also like, I don't want these influencers, like a lot of them burn out really quickly. There's a lot of pressure there. Some of them, it's a hobby. Some of them, this is their full-time job. So, I'd like to obviously help them. Um, and so to like kind of streamline into like the next part of your question of like, there's been this big shift in like brands heavily, heavily using them, something I did a talk years ago at GDC. It's actually online. If you search my name,
Ooh,
GDC
send me the
conference.
link. I'll put it in
Yeah.
the show notes for everyone to be
Yeah,
able to find it.
absolutely. Where I talk about using influencer marketing for your indie game and why it's so
Mhm.
important. And, one of the biggest things was back then, and this is like, God, 5 years ago now, if not more. You know, Destructoid had announced that over 60, I think it was like over 60% of their audience uses ad blockers. And I can only imagine that's even more now. Companies like Twitch and YouTube are heavily trying to get around ad blockers. They're trying to like integrate in the video so it doesn't, get blocked, things like that. And so one of the reasons why influencer marketing works so well is because you technically couldn't block it unless you just didn't watch that influencer. So, that was something that was really important, but also like influencer marketing just like it's almost like a natural form of marketing in the sense that Gen Z and millennials, we look at billboards and we kind of tune them out. We grew up with like millennials grew up watching commercials on TV that you couldn't skip.
Oh my
But
gosh, and we were productive during the commercial breaks, I'd like to point out.
right, it was like 2 minutes 30 seconds, get all your stuff done, get your popcorn ready, like run back, or like flip the channel and hope that you remember to flip back in time. you know
Very
but
true.
exactly, but so we've kind of become just numb to these things, but also those billboards, like whether they're ads online or not, don't really tell a story. The current generations that are buying, say, these games or products, they want to be more informed. They want to know about the product before they buy it. With the recession and everything, people are holding on to their money a little bit tighter. We've been in a recession for like,
Ever.
yeah, since like 2008 at this point. So forever, like my entire adult life. And so, it's really kind of one of those things where people want to be educated and, they view influencers as almost a friend in the sense that, word of mouth marketing works really well. Just in the same way that you'd listen to a friend say like, hey, this cleaning product really worked for me. If like a person is watching like an influencer, I mean, cleaning was probably a bad example. You're not going to, I mean, maybe on Instagram, you'll watch an Instagram or like clean or
Oh my
something.
gosh,
But
I watch Clean Talk a lot. I'm not gonna lie.
dude, TikTok, like, oh my God.
I
Yeah.
actually watch a lot of cleaning videos and have bought a lot of cleaning products as a result. So
Yeah,
cleaning is a great example as far as
yeah.
I'm concerned.
I mean, that's the thing though, is like you're gonna watch this person, you want to see it in action. Like you don't want to see a Photoshop billboard that is like, oh, here's my dirty sink and then now it's magically clean. And it's like, yeah, okay, that I'm gonna call BS on that one. Like that's two different bathtubs. Like it isn't real to us. And because we've had so much fake advertising like pushed into our lives. And so, having these influencers, it's much more natural. But that kind of goes back to where things can go heavily wrong. I personally, tell my influencers when I'm working with games is like, hey, be honest about our game. I'd rather you be honest and say what you like and what you don't like, because honestly, that's going to sell our game better. And I just tell them like, hey, if you hit like a major bug, can you like, rather than rage quitting on stream, can you like email me? Like, that would be great. Like, I'll help you out. But, I tell people to be honest. And a lot of companies I've found apparently do not. They say like, you can only say positive things on stream. You can only say positive things on your video, and we have to approve the video first. Which, I mean, if you're getting paid, fair game. That's understandable. In the sense of like, okay, hey, I'm paying you $4,000 to create an ad. It's literally an ad. FTC regulations, they're supposed to put that it's an ad and things like that. But, I see a lot of companies making it so it's only positive only. And I'd rather hear, I'd rather it just doesn't convert, Yeah.
I have a kind of follow-up question to that, because one of the themes that's come up, and you did talk at in-depth about it, but is this idea that consumers want to be informed. And you gave some reasons for that, especially, the recession, older millennials. I totally get that. But do you think that social media growth has obviously changed the way we interact in so many ways, but why do you think there is an interest in being informed? Because you're kind of not the first person I've explored that with, and I've never thought about, okay, so we do have this shift where people want more information, but why?
Yeah. No, I have I have a lot of good theories on that. If I think we're about the same age, so you probably understand where, when I was in middle school and stuff, if I need to write a research project, I had to go to the library. I had to find all the books. I knew the Dewey Decimal System. I used to have to pull out the little card system, find the cards, like pull it out, go find the book and everything. I don't think anyone knows what I'm talking about if they're younger than 20 or younger than 30, honestly.
Oh, God. Have you seen the videos of kids asking why we call it hanging up a phone?
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
man.
Or what burning a CD is. I'm like, oh, my heart hurts.
I actually did have someone once ask me how I was holding a CD that I just burned, because wouldn't it be very hot? And I'm like, yeah, be warm. But it's not on fire.
Yeah, it's not literally burning.
Yeah. And so our generation, and older, very limited in the knowledge that was being fed to us. Very limited. Like, if we wanted information about something, we had to go look up that information. Or get magazines in the mail that would we'd read and learn and stuff. But our generation, the younger side of millennials and the Gen Z, they're being fed information 24/7, and it's information overload. They're getting fed misinformation and regular information, real information, like all over the whole gambit. And so it's almost like, I wouldn't say necessarily that they want to be more informed, but they want to find real information. Because yeah, sure, I can go to a website and read reviews, or I can go to Amazon and read reviews, but a lot of Amazon reviews we're finding are fake. Like they give free product, and it doesn't necessarily say people got free product. And obviously FTC tried more in the past 5 years, has tried to really update their game in the sense of rules for influencer marketing, rules for blogs or videos, for even promoted tweets. But, this is something I even was thinking about earlier today. Like, they've tried to make a couple examples of game studios and find them. I think EA, maybe, and Warner Brothers, I think, were ones who got fined in the past. But there's so many that just it isn't enough, in the sense that I have not found studios to be really scared of hey, the FTC is going to come fine us.
Yeah, I get that.
Don't insure that.
It might be the cost of doing business to pay a fine worth pennies to them.
Yeah. And so, it's really tough for, Gen Z to find what's real and what's fake. And so they're constantly looking for that natural interaction. And that's part of why, going back to, I always tell influencers, tell people what you don't like, and just be honest with it though. Don't like rage quit and cause drama, please. But in the sense of like, hey, I really enjoy like the story and the art. I'm not necessarily a fan of this gameplay, etc. Or hey, this game is really good, but I think they should update this. And we might go update that. But it's just one of those things with Gen Z and millennials that we trust word of mouth marketing so much more, and I think it's because of just that information overload.
Well, that is a good. I haven't thought about that before. I mean, I thought about it not in the context of. I've thought about the information overload, but not in the context of influencer marketing. And I feel like one of the biggest differences is advertising also used to be, when you were saying that, I was thinking this, advertising also used to be so passive. You could flip by it or not read the billboard or whatever it was. And now it's like, it's actively in your face.
Yeah, right?
It is not passively in your face. It's like, you can't really go through a day without even like SMS marketing. I mean, you can't, there's no way of interacting with the online world without having advertisements come at you. And it's not necessarily always like a full frontal assault by any means, but it's also not as easy as it is to not read a billboard. It's some type of in-between space where you're having to think about a lot of things and look at a lot of products and ideas all the time.
Yeah.
And so no wonder why when you have that one person who's kind of your Sherpa, you trust them.
Yeah. I mean, I would love to go to a website at some point, even with the ad blockers I use. I would love to go to a website and not have it pop up telling me if I sign up for emails and then sign up for text as well that I get 10% off. And I signed up for one the other day. I nearly I wanted to report them to the FTC almost, because I signed up for one the other day and then within the course of 3 hours, they texted me 10 times.
Oh, that is how not to do it.
Exactly. So it's just like, it's one of those things where we're just constantly.
Oh, that's painful.
And it's shoved in your face. And so, obviously advertising is never going to go away. Like, we need to remember that is like, yeah, obviously we're talking about a lot of negative ways people are doing advertising and how we're like being bombarded with it. But we need to remember it's never going to go away, unfortunately. I mean, it is how brands, let people know about their product. But, we need to, as marketing people, we need to remember that, what's going on out there and, how do we do it in a way that is positive for consumers? How do we do it in a way that makes them feel happy and like not stressed out?
Yeah, I think that, because advertising really isn't all bad. I mean, if good products could get sold by just sitting on the shelf nicely and quietly, we wouldn't have advertising, but that's just not the reality of the world. So I am not against advertising or marketing. It is just a lot.
Yeah.
How do you kind of see that changing as we get more into metaverse-like experiences, more into virtual worlds and all of that? What's the onslaught looking like?
Oh my God.
What's the forecast?
I bring this up. I didn't even put this in my notes when I was thinking about this podcast, but now that I'm thinking about it, and I bring it up constantly, is the movie Idiocracy. Which, younger generation, if you have not watched that, you need to watch it. It still holds up. I watched it 2 weeks ago. It's one of these things where, when we have VR, we're already starting to see it with different events like, the Wave VR and Fortnite. You can go and watch concerts. You can go see celebrities and influencers. Justin Bieber, Travis Scott, Marshmello have all done concerts in Fortnite. And so like I see that, we're already getting these experiences where people can jump in and, really experience cool stuff, which is great. That's a good start. One of the things when it comes to VR now is, and I was let me rewind a minute. I back years ago was one of the first people to even I was at Steam, like at Valve. Yep. I was at Valve and literally was playing with their prototypes of what ended up becoming the HTC Vive. I was at QuakeCon when John Carmack literally had like a little folding card table in the corner and had the first Oculus headset. And literally he had his game Rust with no clipping on and just was like, here's the Oculus headset. I definitely took it off within a minute and almost threw up. And these devices, when they first came out, they were like $800, $1,200. Like, it was really expensive. And, you started seeing in stores these like little pop-up cardboard like things that you could put your phone into. And it just was not that great of an experience. But now with like Oculus Quest 2, which is like $299, it is much more accessible to get into. They actually have things now like inserts to make it so you can actually wear your glasses while being in VR, which was not something that you could do ages ago. And it's wireless. Like, the fact that it's like you don't have a whole bunch of cords going to your computer is insane to me. Like,
Yeah.
I had the first developer kit, like with HTC Vive. I had one of the first dev kits, and it literally was a pile of cords. Every single time I wanted to use it, it was like a whole day's work to get it to work. And it was messy. And so now it's accessible. So I see that like now this will be the new frontier. I think the metaverse is still kind of being defined in the sense that I, even before this podcast, like Googled again to make sure I was like, am I still up to date? Because I feel old every minute.
Thanks, Gen Z. It's their fault.
Right. Right. Like, yes, I know I use TikTok, but I still don't know how to use Snapchat, things like that. But it's very accessible now, and that's going to help brands get in there easily. And I think we can look at the past of things that happened too early, such as the first VR headsets, but also like we can look back at Second Life, which is a prime example of literally having a second life. You have a virtual life. We can look at games such as World of Warcraft, where guilds and things, you brought people together, you had these avatars. And, I think it's important to tell people, like, literally the metaverse is a very similar thing, except you're literally like moving your body around, like you are in there. And I think that's the separation between, like, say, Second Life versus what's happening with VR and AR. And I think things like AR, the fact that pretty much every single phone out there at this point can handle AR technology. Companies such as Things, they actually offer instant AR conversion. You upload a 3D model to Things, it is instantly converted into AR. You don't need to download any app to view it, which is crazy to me. Like, you can just literally click on a link on Things on a website, no apps needed, and then you're viewing it in AR. So, the accessibility is just so easy now. Like, the barrier to entry, you can just get into creating AR experiences, things like that. And I think Snap also has been doing, and Instagram has been doing a ton with those AR experiences. And you go and look at, say, Riot Games with the League of Legends World's Champion, competition that they had in Beijing. They literally had an AR experience while the concert was going on, where they had a dragon come in. Like, these really cool things.
I remember that. That was one of the coolest things I'd ever watched in sport, and seeing it in the stadium, I was just blown away. It was so cool. Highly recommend for everyone out there to Google the YouTube video. It's awesome.
It's incredible. And so you have all these things now where you can go into, there's some store, I don't know if it's Gucci or Prada. There's some like fancy store that obviously I cannot afford because I don't remember which store it was, but I went into one recently, and they literally had an AR app where you could just like look over the like the purse or whatever, and it would tell you all the features and tell you how much it costs. And they had no price tags in the store. You had to use their app thing. Like, and it was just a camera, really. Like, it just, so there's these experiences are being created. And when we talk about marketing strategies for it, I think we're still very, very fresh in the sense of like, we're still exploring what those marketing opportunities are and how to do them well. Kind of like when Twitch first came out, how do we do live stream marketing well? So I think we're going to see a lot of fumbles, but I think, companies like Fortnite, that's kind of a whole range of generations getting in there and stuff. Plus, all these AR things, but also Facebook and Oculus Quest being so easy. I think we're going to start seeing more like experiments in the sense, and we're going to see a lot of failures, but as long as we learn from them, I think the strategies are really going to start moving quickly.
What are you is there anything that you're sort of hoping to see that's different than maybe how advertising has been? I'm not trying to ask
Yeah.
any leading questions, but I'm just curious about, what your hopes are, I guess, for whatever happens with the metaverse.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I think we should really keep in mind is things that have gone negative in some things, like, say, Second Life, but also, like, there's been even instances in VR recently. Like, I think there was some metaverse thing that happened recently where a girl or a woman was, like, harassed
I actually
in the
think that
game.
was a girl, which makes it
Okay.
worse. She
Ugh.
was young. It was a
Yeah,
young
because I
person.
couldn't remember like what her age was or anything, but
And I think
she was
it was
harassed.
like an early teen.
Oof, that's
So,
rough. Yeah.
yeah.
And so companies are missing the mark on things like this because, if you had um a woman on your team, but not just like one woman, but multiple women on the team, and multiple like minorities, they probably could have raised that red flag of like, hey, we need to have community standards in place to protect people. And the reason I say multiple women is because, and multiple minorities even, is we have internalized misogyny. I can never say that word correctly. We have internalized issues. Yeah, I can't. I'm like, why do we have the hardest word to define this? But the thing is that, we tend to become blind to things because when you grow up and you're taught that like something is just the way it is because it is the way it is. It's the way it's been done for years. You tend to get stuck in that yourself. Like you tend to think yourself, like if you grow up thinking that, everything that blue is blue, if everybody in your life told you that that was green, you grow up thinking it's green. And even if one person told you like, no, that's actually blue, you might not believe it. And you might just be like, well, you're weird. But that isn't the case. And we can look back at like the history of, we've always had LGBT communities our whole lives.
Yeah.
But, they couldn't be out open about, and they still a lot of times can't be in the open about, their sexual orientation because generation after generation was taught that that is not okay. And so, we need multiple people from multiple different viewpoints, but also we need allies to bring people out of that train of thought. So, when we come to, these communities and things that are happening in literally creating societies. And I think that's something people need to realize is when we're talking about the metaverse and we're talking about, say, VR chat, you're literally creating a society.
That is
so how do you protect it?
That's a new way of thinking about it for me. Not that it's not true, but that's a very succinct way of describing how it's necessarily different than Better Life or than Second Life. Yeah. Second Life was a game. I mean, it's hard to exactly imagine the crossover between the game and social media, but I think the word society kind of describes that pretty well.
Because if you think about it, you're creating a society that also has economies. You have like city planning almost, like you have all these things. And when you look at game studios and their structures, they literally, a lot of studios have like economic people on their teams to design these systems. They have people who have studied sociology. World of Warcraft, where there was like a virus or whatever, has been studied with virologists.
Right.
Wow, I cannot speak English sometimes, but they exactly. You all know what I'm saying.
Right.
But these things have been studied by different society professors and stuff.
Yeah.
Sociologists.
There you go.
Something like that. But it's really important to understand that we are creating new worlds. We're creating, so we need to remember like, yeah, okay, this is the wild, wild west. It's new frontiers that we haven't explored before. And think about, when you look at, through history, unexplored places, societies coming in, this is the wild, wild west. So do we want it to be free reign with no laws where people can just murder people because they're not happy about it? Like, which, yeah, in gaming, sometimes if, PvP's on and I don't like this person, I'm going to just, kill them. But, how do we protect those minorities just like we would in real life? When we come to the metaverse, we can't separate that avatar too much because, remember with things like Twitter and stuff, it's that whole mask. You're wearing a mask. You can still have a mask in these worlds, and that has helped a lot of people break out of their shell, but it's also really hurt a lot of people. The fact that, on Twitter and things, people can be harassed. Like, God, I can't even tell you how many times people have told me to self because I did a panel on like being a woman in gaming. Like, and you know what? That person would probably never tell me it to my face.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I know. It's so much easier to hide online. I don't feel as if our tech has evolved much faster than our, I don't know if it's societal norms. I don't know if it's ability to understand, but it's like we have tools that are way more powerful than we have the language, the communication to handle well. The laws are way behind.
Yeah.
And even things like corporate governance, even self-imposed laws are way behind. And I don't necessarily think that's anyone's fault because I think the tools grew much faster than we did. But it's going to take a lot of years to catch up to that. And I think with the coming of the metaverse, yeah, you're right. It's a whole new society now.
Yeah.
We're already struggling with our real world.
Exactly. And that's what I was just going to add is we have people being harassed in real life and we have people being harassed in VR. So, we haven't even finished in real life helping people and creating safe places for people. So we're going to be struggling, obviously, in the metaverse.
Yeah. Well, on that note, I had about 50 other questions for you that we didn't get to, which means that you're just going to have to come back on at some point.
That's fine. That is fine.
So I'm going to do a quick summary of what we were able to cover, and then I'm going to ask you the final question that I ask every guest. Sure. So just to quickly summarize, we started off with a really long chat on influencer marketing that was very fascinating. As someone who has a lot of experience in it, I think your opinion and your experiences are really valuable. Influencer marketing can make or break a brand. Smaller influencers have good networks with each other, and so that can make a really big difference in brand strategy. People, when it comes to consumers interacting with influencer marketing, people want to know more about who and what they're buying from, and influencers kind of represent that friendly word of mouth marketing. So it's important to also, with that, have influencers be honest. If you're kind of paying someone to be dishonest, then they lose their own credibility, and it all relies on this kind of trust and honesty.
Yep.
When it comes to why people trust influencers, you made the great point that since we're getting fed information 24/7, people want to be comfortable and find real information. They kind of need a guidepost or a sign to do that, which is why they look to people that seem trustable. We also talked about how advertising isn't all bad. It's just changed a lot and it's become a lot to handle, but there's still a lot of positives to advertising and marketing. When it comes to VR and metaverse experiences, things are getting more accessible, not only to consumers, but to brands, which means that we're going to have a new frontier as brands start to move in. We'll see some fumbles in how brands activate in their metaverse experiences and what they decide to ultimately do. But it's a huge mark that people actually can move in and can start trying and experimenting. Companies so far may be missing the mark with some of the developments, especially when it comes to things like community standards. Having those in place really early on, it can help a community or an experience or whatever it is, an object, grow in a really healthy and comfortable way. People need help recognizing why it's important to have those standards in place and what they mean, which means that you have to bring diversity onto your team so that you can learn from other folks who might have gone through some things. In the metaverse, I thought this was just so poignant, but the metaverse means you're actually creating a society with full-on economies, with language, with city planning, with way more. There's a lot of responsibilities that come with that, and it's not necessarily good to have everything be free reign. But we also have a lot to figure out when it comes to that. So for our last little section, I like to ask this of every guest because I think it's a great way of letting other people know wherever they're at, the things that you wish you had known when you were in that place. So in my moment of reflection, I want to ask you, what is one thing you would like to tell your younger self about getting into the gaming industry and being successful?
Oh God.
I've gotten that response a couple times too.
Yeah, it's such a tough thing. In the sense that, I there's probably a million things, but it's not just like about getting into gaming. It's just life in general, in the sense of uh really exploring oneself and learning. But, one of the things I probably would have told my younger self is, uh well, now I keep on going to say stuff and then I'm like, you know what? No. Because one of the things that I really tried to do when I was young and I still try to do is really like um learn everything I can. Learn about different aspects, learn about different cultures, things like that. And, when it comes to my younger self, I probably would have said I probably would have said something around the lines to prevent myself from burning out, because
Mhm.
when you're working in the game industry, it's such a high risk, high reward industry.
Mhm.
And you can really get burned out easily. And something I always did when I was younger was like, I would work every single weekend. I would be traveling, like, I would be flying out every other week, which is great, but also, like, it really hurt my health in the long run. And so, like, something I would tell my younger self is just, take a break, take a breather, actually take those vacations, and really reflect on yourself and like, meditate, then, just kind of make inner peace for yourself.
So how do you balance those two things? Constant learning, but also taking a break.
Yeah, and that's the thing that I think I still struggle with today
Mhm.
is when I get on a new project, I like deep dive. And I have a really hard time saying no in the sense of, if someone asks me for help or someone like, just on the weekend even like needs research help or whatever, I still struggle to this day saying no. I like helping people. And so it's one of those things of like just remembering to take time for yourself and learning how to say no and how to like be like, you know what, even no to yourself.
Ooh,
And
that's a good one. Yeah.
exactly. And I think that's something like I was so happy last year, actually, a year ago today. I like went off into the woods with no cell phone service for like a week and like literally just shut off from everything and like was fishing and stuff and just I needed, but it was also because like pretty much my boyfriend forced me out there. Because I
So
needed
he knew
someone
to
to
say no
tell.
to you, is what you're saying.
Exactly, right. And so because like I have a hard time saying no to myself. I do not know my limits sometimes. And,
Mhm.
I will work through the pain, the sickness, whatever is going on, the stress. I will work through it until like literally I crash, which is not great. So learning how to say no to yourself and like, even if it's learning or a research project or whatever, you need to take those moments to like play games with your friends or like, take a moment to not do whatever you're doing. So like go walk around a park or something. You need to do those things even if you don't want to.
I like that.
Yeah.
So keep learning, but know
Mhm.
when to stop and
Yep.
know when to say no to yourself as well.
Yeah. Pretty
Yeah.
much.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. Where can
Yeah.
people find or follow you or reach out to you if you are comfortable with that?
Yeah, no, the probably the best place for me is Twitter. Like I tell everyone, reach out to me on Twitter. Like my Instagram super private, Facebook super private. And that's as of recently because I learned to say no to myself and I learned to take myself like offline.
Good for you.
Right? Like and that's such a tough thing. So it's Twitter best place. It's at OMG laser kitten. So which laser is spelled with a Z. So at OMGLAZERKITTENS. Oh my god, laser kittens, which
So
yes,
my
best name ever.
yeah, it really is. Also, Twitter is also my preferred form of social media, so I get it.
Yeah.
For all of the listeners out there, thank you so much for joining me. Be sure to leave those 5-star ratings and reviews. Also, check out other holodeck media podcasts, including Meta Business for all the metaverse finance stories you could ever want, and Business of Esports for interviews with industry leaders. I'm on Twitter, as aforementioned, also on Instagram and LinkedIn at Lindsay Poss. You can catch me Wednesday nights on the Business of Esports Live After Show, and you can catch this podcast in your feed every Tuesday. We'll see you all next week.
Thanks for joining us here on Meta Woman. Make